Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. Have you ever wondered about language and the brain? Do you know about it? No? Well, here I will be explaining about it. Language and the brain refers to the study of how language is represented and processed in the human brain. It focuses on the mental and neural mechanisms that allow us to speak, understand, read and write. This field combines insights from neurolinguistics, which examines how specific brain regions like broadcast and Wernicke's areas control language functions, and psycholinguistics, which explores how our mind comprehend and produce language. Understanding how language works in the brain helps researchers identify how language is learned and how it can be affected by brain injury and disorders. Later in this video, me and my group mates will be explaining about other different concepts under the language and the brain. Let's jump right in. Let's talk about tip of the tongue phenomenon. Schwartz 1999 defined tip of the tongue is a temporary failure to retrieve a familiar word despite a strong feeling of knowing. BINTI and Coughlin 1999 stated tip of the tongue is a partial recall state where individuals remember aspects of a word but cannot fully retrieve it. From Schwartz and Frazier 2005, tip of the tongue is a failure in accessing phonological information despite retained meaning. From these definitions by scholars, the tip of the tongue phenomenon is a temporary state when someone could not recall the word they want to convey despite knowing its characteristics and meaning. From Schwartz 2010 suggests that the anterior cingulate cortex plays a key role in monitoring the conflict between the sensation of knowing and the failure to retrieve a word during the tip of the tongue state. This implies the relation of neurolinguistics with the phenomenon by the study of changes of emotion and the brain when the subject is trying to retrieve a word. Now, here's the real-world example of tip of the tongue phenomenon.
Jimmy told you before, I want to say. Anyway, you know, it reminds me, I need this knife. I'm gonna take this, it's okay?
Okay, yeah,
I just need it for a
bring
little
it
while.
back though, you know.
Well, the poor thing, you know, I hit him in his, we hit the deer in his paw, what do you call it?
The paw,
The paw,
his foot.
what do you call it? The hoof got caught in that grill, I gotta hack it off.
Ooh.
In the memorable dinner scene from Goodfellas 1990 at Tommy's mother's house late at night, as they sit down to eat, Tommy attempts to explain why they need a knife. Tommy said, "We hit a deer. What do you call it? The paw." At this moment, Tommy struggles to recall the correct term for the animal's food, experiencing the classic tip of the tongue phenomenon. He knows the word, he's searching for it, but he can't retrieve it immediately. Jimmy, while eating, assists. Jimmy said, "The hoof." Then Tommy continues. Tommy said, "The hoof. The hoof got caught in a grill. I gotta hack it off." This is the tip of the tongue phenomenon moment, because when someone is temporarily unable to retrieve a known word, often a proper noun or specific term, despite feeling that recall is imminent. Like in this scene, there's a partial recall effect where Tommy tries to remember that there's a specific term for deer's foot, but initially refers to it as a paw. And there's another action that is assisted retrieval by Jimmy, who provides the correct term for hoof, allowing Tommy to continue his explanation. This brief exchange exemplifies how tip of the tongue moments can occur in everyday conversation, highlighting the nuances of human memory and language retrieval. Now, I will pass another concept that will be explained by my other group members.
Wernicke's aphasia. So, in order to understand what Wernicke's aphasia really is, firstly, we need to understand what's the function of Wernicke's area and what does it have to do with the language and the brain. So basically, in general, Wernicke's area, or also known as a region of the brain that contains motor neurons involved in the comprehension of speech. It's located at the posterior third of the upper temporal convolution of the left hemisphere of our brain. This area closely associated with the auditory cortex, and first being described by Carl Wernicke. But how does it relate to our theme? Just like what I've mentioned before, Wernicke's area control our understanding towards the language. So, if there is any damage to the temporal lobe or the Wernicke's area, such as having a stroke, traumatic brain injury, brain tumor, or any kind of progressive neurological disease, it may result in a language disorder known as Wernicke's aphasia. A person with Wernicke's aphasia will face the difficulty to understand the language. Unlike Broca's aphasia, patients with Wernicke's aphasia still manage to speak fluently, thus not having any trouble in producing speech at all, even though it's lack of meaning. So, let's see the real world example of the Wernicke's aphasia.
Do you have blonde hair?
No, I don't.
Do you have blue hair?
No, those computer guys.
Are we outside?
Yes, I think that's nice.
Are we at the library?
No, I think so.
Are we at a hospital?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
For a normal person like us, we can clearly hear that she has a problem in terms of understanding those given questions correctly. If you notice, even though her response were a bit unexpected, yet she still managed to answer fluently, thus not having any trouble to produce the speech at all. As you guys can see, when the doctor asks a different question that actually shared the same kind of answer, the patient seems to give a different kind of answer. When the doctor asks, is her hair color blue or blonde, we can clearly see that her hair color is actually black, so the answer is no. But the patient with the Wernicke's aphasia answered it wrongly.
Conduction aphasia was first described in 1874 by Carl Wernicke. It is a syndrome that is characterized by a frequent phoneme paraphrase with attempt at self-correcting, the impairment repetition, and naming difficulty in the presence of otherwise fluent and grammatical speech output. In contrast to this deficit in speech production, patients with conduction aphasia have relatively spared auditory comprehension. Via the definition, we can understand that a person that was diagnosed with conduction aphasia has a good auditory comprehension, meaning that they can understand what is being said to them, but they have difficulty in repeating the word or the phrase. Thus, they have sound-based speech error. People with conduction aphasia are typically aware of their error and often have a hard time correcting themselves. Neurolinguistic-wise, according to National Center for Biotechnology Information, the most common cause of conduction aphasia is stroke, which is cause damage to certain part of brain, especially when the acquired fasciculus is damaged. According to Frontiers, the acquired fasciculus functions to transfer information between Wernicke area and bronchial area. Easy to say, it is like a bridge that sends information to both parts of the brain. Without the information, the brain cannot function like it normally does. Psycholinguistic-wise, according to Good Class 1992, the patient with conduction aphasia can identify the picture but have a hard time to perfectly pronounce the word. He also includes that the behavior of attempting self-correcting themselves. This self-correcting behavior is often resulting in repeat unsuccessful effort to correct the phonological speech error called conduit the approach, French word for approach conduct. It shows that the patient are aware of their own mistake and trying to correct themselves. This is the real example of conduction aphasia patient.
Barbles.
During 6 seconds of the video, we can see that the patient can recognize the picture of the marble, indicating that she has a good comprehension, which is in line with the characteristic of conduction aphasia that was stated by the National Center for Biotechnology Information, which is the patient with conduction aphasia have fluency in language and great comprehension. She cannot produce the correct sound of marbles. Instead, she keeps repeating barbles in attempt to correct herself. This behavior is exactly like the approach conduct that was stated by Douglas 1992. It also aligns with his statement, which is conduction aphasia patient unable to produce sound correctly.
I'll be talking about slips of the ear. What is the definition of slips of the ear? According to 1ZS 2021, slips of the ear or ear slips happen when people misunderstand what they hear during a normal conversation. These mistakes usually involve a word or a short phrase and are mainly caused by a small differences in sound, either in the way they are produced, which is phonetics, or organized, which is phonology. Sometimes, vowel errors are influenced by an accent variation or different speaking styles, but consonants are more prone to be mistaken rather than vowels. To further elaborate, Bond explains that ear slips are especially likely when the speech is unclear, such as in a noisy environment, over the phone, or speaking with someone who have an unfamiliar accent. In this situation, listeners' brain often fill in the missing and unclear information based on familiar patterns and expectations. This can lead to common mishearing, such as hearing ice cream with ice cream. What is the relationship between ear slips and language and the brain? From the neurolinguistic point of view, according to Bear Anta, Connors BW, and Paradiso MA 2020, slips of the ear happen because the brain doesn't just hear sound, they try to quickly make sense of it. This job is mainly done by the Wernicke's area, which is from the left side of the brain, that helps us to understand language. When the speech is unclear, like in a loud space or over the phone like I've said before, the brain uses memory and past tense to guess what was said. This is called the top-down processing. If two phrases sound similar, the brain might choose the wrong one. This is why slips of the ear would happen. These errors show how the brain works to understand language. Slips of the ear involve both hearing the sound, low-level processing, and figuring out what they mean, high-level thinking. Neurolinguists study this mistake to learn how the brain links sound, meaning, and memory when we listen. From the psycholinguistic point of view, according to Van OSM, KHAIRUL, and Denberg B 2021, this happened because our brain just doesn't wait to hear each word. It actively guesses what's coming based on the situation and what we already experienced. This helps us understand speech more quickly, but sometimes it leads to mistakes, like hearing the wrong word. So slips of the ear aren't just random errors. They happen because the brain is trying to make the best guess with information that it has. So the real world example of slips of the ear.
What is your biggest mistake?
The biggest beefsteak is...
In the 7th second of the video, a girl was asked what is your biggest mistake, but she mishears it and confidently responds with the biggest beefsteak instead. Biggest mistake and biggest beefsteak share a similar rhythm, syllable structure, and consonant sound, especially in a casual, fast speech. This is in line with how psycholinguists and neurolinguists describe slips of the ear, where the brain would fill in this unclear information and change it to something that we already knew.
So, I'm going to talk about slip of the tongue. Dr. Richard Nordquist finds a slip of the tongue as a mistake in speaking, usually trivial and sometimes amusing. He also cites British linguist Josh Yule, who explains that most everyday slips of the tongue are often the result of sounds being transferred from one word to another. For example, in black boxes instead of black boxes, a sound is carried over from one word to the next. As we can conclude, a slip of the tongue is not a disease caused by mispronouncing certain sounds. According to Dr. Richard Nordquist, a slip of the tongue is simply a harmless and often humorous mistake. It is unintentional and likely a normal part of everyday speech. Dr. Bernadette M. Jasma, a professor at Mass University, explains that the brain has a built-in checking system to catch and correct mistakes during speech. Using brain scans EEG, researchers observed specific brain activity occurring just before people made speech errors. This activity was found in the supplementary motor area, a part of the medial frontal cortex involved in planning movements like speaking. A new idea from this study is that speech error may not just result from mixing up sounds, but instead from brain activating two competing speech plans at the same time. This information explains that the brain is already checking if what we are about to say is correct. Results from the brain scan activity also showed that the brain sometimes prepares two different things to say at once, which can cause mistakes. In psycholinguistics, tongue slip are one kind of speech error, which are regarded mostly as errors of articulation. Surrender Shutter in 2004 stated that it is a complicated mental processing which is happening entirely below the level of consciousness, so we are not aware of doing anything except when we hear ourselves saying something funny, and it's all happening at such lightning speed that we are not aware of any time these steps are taking. To conclude, tongue slip occur unintentionally, and we usually only realize them after the error has been made. Surrender Shutter uses humor as an example to show that the same kind of fast subconscious brain activity also occurs when tongue slips happen. I'm gonna show you the real world example of tongue slip.
Areas of Drist and Mizzle, Drist and, what am I saying here? Mist and Drizzle, I literally combine both.
As we can see in the news clip, the weatherman named Matt David had a slip of the tongue, where he said drizzle and mizzle instead of mist and drizzle. This might be the result of his brain trying to carry out two speech plans at once, as suggested by researchers who conducted brain scan studies mentioned by Dr. Jasma. Additionally, Mr. David probably did not even realize his speech errors at the time and only noticed it after he made the mistake. That's all from me. I'm gonna pass it to the next member to explain their concept.
Let's talk about Broca's aphasia. The word Broca comes from a French physician named Pierre-Paul Broca, who discovered an area in the brain in 1861. Broca's area is located in the left hemisphere of the brain within the frontal lobe. Now, let's define what is Broca's aphasia. According to Lauren Helicor in 2023, she defined Broca's aphasia as a subtype of aphasia causing difficulty with spontaneous and fluent speech, making the patient diagnosed have trouble and talk in short fragmented sentences. The main cause of Broca's aphasia could be from a stroke, traumatic brain injury, a tumor, or maybe brain infection. How do we relate Broca's aphasia with neurolinguistic? According to Andrea Christina in an article of Neuron Up, she explains that the Broca area is the verbal production of language and the planning of movement and programming of language. Thus, when the Broca's area is damaged, it hinders the ability of verbal production of language. Another part of the brain that is important in language production is the Wernicke's area. The Wernicke's area, defined by Andrea Christina, is associated with the understanding and comprehension of language. This explains how Broca's aphasia patients have no trouble understanding speech given to them, but they have struggled to translate the mental images into. Andrea Christina concluded that the relationship between the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area is important in a normal language processing. Now I'm going to show you an example of a patient who is diagnosed with Broca's aphasia.
Name the days of the week.
I've had Saturday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
At the beginning of the video, the therapist asked the diagnosed patient of Broca's aphasia a question, which is, name him the days of the week. At first, we can conclude that the patient understands what the question is, but they struggle to get the right answers. In the video, you can see he is muttering and stuttering before he finally managed to answer the names of the days of the week. This shows how his Wernicke's area part of the brain is not affected, and the damage of Broca's aphasia hindered his production of speech in the video.